This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 8, Episode 13. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of shows brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. Today is Friday, May 19th, 2023, as of the recording of this episode. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by our co-host and producer, Matthew Maruster.
That's me again. What's up, man?
Doing great. We have missed all of you out there, Facebook peeps, YouTube peeps, those of you that are catching this after the fact, not live, just in the podcast feed or whatever. But been lots going on here at headquarters, and but some travel involved in there too, trips and classes and events. A couple weeks ago, we were sponsors at the A Girl and a Gun National Conference, and I was teaching there, and Jake was there helping, and that was a great time. The very next weekend, I was off in Tennessee teaching a class. So it's been a busy time, but I am thrilled to be with you today, all of you viewing or listening, and I'm also thrilled to be with my friend Matthew, able to do the podcast since it's been a couple weeks. So welcome. Well, as we were kind of experimenting with a little different format or flow with things, today's episode, by the way, is the news, and we're doing industry news and legislative updates. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with you. But we'll also get to sponsor messages throughout the episode as opposed to giving them to you right away. So we're going to jump right into it. I do want to make a quick note, though, that since it's been a little while since we were able to do a news and legislative update episode, there's been a lot that's happened the last couple of months, and so we've probably missed or probably are missing some things from this episode. So if there's something that you're really passionate about, that you're like, doggone it, Riley, Matthew, why didn't you talk about, this thing happening in my state or this federal thing or whatever, just know that there's a lot of things that we could talk about. And we always have to make a choice for every one of these episodes, which ones we are able to do within the time frame that we have available. Welcome, Connor and Eddie, watching live. Appreciate you guys. And thank you, Eddie. I'm glad you love this show. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and get into our stories. Our first one here today, Matthew actually is responsible for a lot of our stuff today because he's done a great job covering a number of these legislative issues on concealedcarry.com. So right off the bat, Matthew, tell us about this prohibiting 18 to 20-year-olds from purchasing handguns ruled unconstitutional. A federal judge in the U.S. District for the Eastern District of Virginia recently ruled on. Pretty interesting, cool news, I think.
Yeah, so this is cool. This just happened, I think last week, or possibly this week, Wednesday. So this week, and essentially, there's a case called Frazier versus the ATF, and essentially, this kid, he's not 21 years old, but he wants to buy a handgun, and so the federal law prohibits someone who's 18 through 20 years old from buying a handgun through an FFL.
Right.
Individual states can limit possession and things, but the federal government, it doesn't prohibit possession. Just you can't purchase it through an FFL. And so
And likewise, if you want to buy ammunition for a handgun, same
absolutely.
thing as there as well, which is always kind of tricky because even if you are able to possess one in your state legally, can be challenging sometimes to buy the ammo for it. But anyway,
Yeah,
sorry, continue.
no, that's a good point. And so it ties into this really well because this kid wants to buy. Well, he's not a kid. To me, he's a kid. This young man wants to buy a Glock 19X. Goes to a FFL, is appropriately or per the law refused purchase. However, he's the court recognizes that he's has no criminal history. He's a otherwise responsible adult American citizen who isn't prohibited otherwise, not convicted of being having any mental issues, fugitive of justice, dishonorably discharged, all those things, right? So essentially, the only thing prohibiting him is the Gun Control Act 1968 that made this age distinction for purchasing handguns. So he sues the government and says this is unconstitutional. And the judge comes back and basically agrees. Not basically, he does, and says, yeah, this is not constitutional behavior. Uh, there's a 70 some page opinion, 71 page opinion that this judge releases on his ruling here, and it's really interesting because there are several arguments, sub arguments. They in essentially a lot of the things that we talk about with gun control advocates about, the Second Amendment in general, like what does it mean to keep and bear arms? And the Second Amendment really only covers this behavior, not that. And one of the things they talked about was, well, the government argued, well, the Second Amendment doesn't, it covers keeping and bearing arms, but it doesn't say anything about purchasing. And so, an adult or somebody who's a parent or a guardian can purchase a handgun for somebody who's 20 to 21 years old, or 18 through 20 years old, and give that to them. And it's not a straw purchase. It's totally legal. And so the government's argument is like, well, they can keep and bear them, they just can't purchase them. So it's not really a violation of the Second Amendment. And so the judge in the ruling does a good job of fleshing that out, and it's really interesting. And so, I don't know, I might be a little weird this way. I'm sure you like reading these types of rulings from judges and stuff and see the actual reasoning behind why they rule one way or the other. And I thought it was fascinating. So I put a lot of that in the article, and you can get the articles in the show notes, links to all the articles, and you can access the complete ruling from Judge Payne. But it's well worth the read, especially if you regularly or find yourself in conversations with anti-gun individuals, or just want to have a better idea of how these judges are interpreting gun restrictive laws, Second Amendment, dealing with Second Amendment issues. So pretty interesting read if you have the time. Now, it didn't change the law. Current law is still the same, but because there's likely to be obviously appeals and that whole process. But this is a good path, I think, first step.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, this kind of sets the stage for what comes next, which typically with these sorts of things, there'll be by the government in this case an appeal on this ruling, and this will get pushed up the chain to higher and higher levels of the federal court system. And kudos to this young man, John Fraser, for being brave enough to lead the charge in this whole thing. Because if and I suspect this was probably done, as is not uncommon in such cases, somewhat intentionally, to go in and say, hey, I want to buy this gun, knowing that they're going to be denied, and then knowing that it's going to set the stage for a case to be made. So kudos to this young man for challenging something that's been a law and has been in effect for a couple of decades, several decades actually now. So yeah, like this is fantastic. I just put a question up on the screen. What do you all think? This is to our listeners and viewers. What do you all think about this ruling to permit 18 to 20-year-olds to purchase handguns, especially as more states are changing or looking to change the laws to raise the minimum purchase age for all guns to 21 or more, as is the case here in Colorado, and Washington State has done that. I think Oregon either did or is anyway. So yeah. More and more states are looking to actually raise the minimum purchase age for all guns to 21, which is hilarious to me because on the one hand, like that's arbitrary regardless, I know that the thought process is, well, a 21-year-old's more mature, I suppose, than an 18-year-old. At least that's the argument, right? Because I think that some of these anti-gun groups are like, hey, there's basically, graduating seniors that are able to walk in their senior year of high school, buy guns, and then go commit a school shooting or something like that. But hey, if you can go and serve in the military, if you can vote, you are a rights possessing adult, a citizen of this country. By golly, the Second Amendment should apply to you too. And that's essentially what uh, Judge Payne took in this ruling. And I love the way he how he approached this. And frankly, he quoted from the Bruin ruling, the Bruin case, saying how his standard that he used, Judge Payne used in this case, was looking at Bruin as an example, which is now U.S. Supreme Court case law, the law of the land, where the Second Amendment's plain text covers an individual's conduct. The Constitution presumptively protects that conduct. The government must then justify its regulation by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Only then may a court conclude that the individual's conduct falls outside the Second Amendment's unqualified command. That's really powerful stuff right there. And I think if we look at the historical record, what we will find is that there's a long history of 18-year-olds possessing all manner of firearms and weaponry. So the Bruin decision here is coming in clutch with the win in this ruling, I would say. And when we talked about Bruin when that first came out, I was, golly, it's been almost a year now, right? I think it was May or June of last year. We knew this was going to have quite a bit in the way of ramifications for other things to follow. So there you go. Appreciate the comment from Jonathan here on Facebook. If you are of age to vote as a full citizen, then have at it. Checking in from Pennsylvania. Have a great weekend. Well, you have a great weekend too, Jonathan. Good stuff. Let's go to our next story here. New York State sues Mean Arms over their AR-15 magazine lock. Mean Arms, kind of an up-and-coming manufacturer of various, particularly AR-15 type parts and accessories and things like that. Kind of doing some innovative stuff. I think they're based in Georgia, if I recall correctly. They came up with this. They call it the MA lock, which is intended to be a device to make guns like an AR-15 in the state of New York, or perhaps like California, or that those types of states that have strong or strict restrictions on the possession of AR-15s. And so to have a New York legal AR-15, you got to have a fixed magazine that does not have a greater capacity than 10 rounds. So the Mean Arms lock, the MA lock, is a means for, it's funny, a lot of redundancies here, is a means to allow you to create an AR-15 that has a fixed non-removable magazine, at least without doing like actual mechanical and somewhat, in some cases, destructive type work. The MA lock is actually installed, and part of the installation process is you tighten this device into the magazine catch portion of the AR-15. The part that you use to tighten with a wrench or a socket actually breaks off. There's actually a shear line where it shears off. So you can basically twist this component together, which assembles it from the two sides of the AR-15's lower receiver. And then as you're tightening it, then the hex kind of bolt head side of it is going to shear off, and now you essentially have this permanent installation of a magazine catch that you can put, at that point you can put a magazine in, and that magazine will be locked in, and you won't be able to remove it without some disassembly. And so that was the whole idea here with the MA lock. Well, here you have a lawsuit by the state of New York, the attorney general, coming after Mean Arms, who isn't even based in their state, but they're coming after them. And basically their argument is that, because what happened was the Buffalo, New York mass shooter was using a New York, what started as a New York compliant AR-15. That shooter modified his AR-15 to then be able to remove magazines and reload. So then he commits that shooting, which was, of course, was a terrible tragedy. But these types of cases are always so fascinating to me, Matthew, because it's sort of like, it's sort of like, when you're reading the labels on like your hairspray or something that you have that you might have in your medicine cabinet at home or whatever, or on your counter in the bathroom. It has all kinds of disclaimers about what to do and what not, especially what not to do, and how it's flammable and dangerous. And hey, if you're using this in a manner that's not consistent with the instructions, then that's prohibited or illegal in some cases, as they like to say. Um, which, obviously some kind of lawsuit somewhere, some kind of team of attorneys has encouraged companies to put all kinds of disclaimers on things. Basically, the argument here is that, uh, yeah, okay, so there was an MA lock installed on this shooter's rifle. He then destructively removed that or modified it in some way so he could reload his mags. And now it's the fault of the manufacturer of that MA lock, Mean Arms in this case, and so they're being sued. And part of the case seems to be based around the fact that on the packaging for an MA lock, if you were to buy it from Mean Arms, it has instructions for how to install it. And consequently, it also has instructions for how to uninstall it, which again is a destructive means. You have to use essentially a stripped bolt or stripped screw removal tool to basically unscrew this thing from itself while it's installed on the gun. There's also another tool if you disassemble or take apart the two receivers and take apart the base plate and the spring and follower of the magazine. You can then use a tool to reach in there to pop the magazine body out of the rifle as well. But apparently at issue here is the fact that they have instructions for how to uninstall this device, which is hilarious to me because, um, an argument that could be made is, well, maybe you move to a state where now it's legal to remove that device and you would want to do so. I think that's fair. Um, or maybe there's some other reason, that you need to uninstall it. Maybe the device fails. You need to replace it. You need to, like there's so many different scenarios you could come up with as to why a person might need to install that device, right? The point is you're not going to be able to uninstall it while the gun's in use and while you're in the commission of a crime. Um, and so you're either in compliance with New York state law or you're not. And how do we regulate that? Well, we don't, because criminals are going to be criminals, man.
Mhm.
you know so
Yeah.
dude could have driven across the border and did a purchase of a non-compliant rifle and brought it back. Like it's such a pointless thing, and to come after a company just because they have instructions for how to uninstall something that you might have installed yourself in the first place is ridiculous to me.
Yeah, this is what's her name? The district attorney,
Letitia uh
Letitia James.
James, yeah.
Um, in and she even says part of this lawsuit is that she's saying that Mean Arms is aiding and abetting the illegal possession of assault weapons in New York, and I just find that it's so strange because they're actually selling a product that makes in a New York non-compliant AR-15 compliant with their law. They're
Right.
so like just because they're providing the means to be able, or the directions to able to remove a product that is installed. Now they're actually it doesn't now there's they're not helping to make rifles New York compliant. They're actually aiding a criminal. Like I just it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know if it's a general intent or specific intent, aiding and abetting some sort of criminal action. But I think it's hard to prove or to show or to connect like this company with them putting a removal instructions on their package to some sort of nefarious or criminal, like in kind of encouraging people to violate the law. It doesn't I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's appropriate for a company who makes a product that is installed to actually also show them how the consumer how to take it apart too, right? Like that's just natural. Like that's what you do as a manufacturer of a product. Like this is how you install it, this is how you take it apart. Like it has
Yeah.
nothing to do
And
with
again, requires somewhat specialized tools and is destructive anyway. So like
yeah.
it's just so interesting to me. Yep. Well, there you go. And that's New York State for you too. I mean, it probably comes as no surprise to really anybody. And if you live in New York State, I'm sorry, but I hope that you will be involved in legislative issues that you're in your well, both your local area, but also at the state level, and
Yeah.
try to affect some change. Whether you think it's a hopeless cause or not, we got to keep up the good fight. And this kind of stuff should not stand. Before we get to our next story, hey, today's one of today's episode sponsors is CCW Safe. For the best self-defense legal coverage, in our opinion, turn to CCW Safe. You can check out a variety of plans. The ultimate plan, which is what I have and what I recommend, because you get everything, and it's I think it's very reasonably priced for considering the coverage that you're provided. Uh, CCW Safe is well known and well regarded as far as their reputation with how they stand behind their members, as they have proven and demonstrated in actual cases, and will really truly go to bat for you. All the way to the point of, if you listened to the Stephen Maddox interview that we did quite some time ago now, it's been a couple of years, where he talks about how CCW Safe's team came out, spent time with him on the ground. Uh, the National Trial Counsel for CCW Safe is Don West, a very experienced trial attorney. We've interviewed him on the podcast before. Don West spent his personal time prepping Stephen Maddox for that trial. So that's the kind of service you're going to get from a company like CCW Safe. Check them out today. Go to ccwsafe.com. Check out their ultimate plan. You could also look into their defender plan for intended for concealed carriers, and also their protector plan, which is geared towards LE and military professionals. Check them out today. ccwsafe.com is their website. Use the discount code CC Podcast to save 10% off of CCW Safe membership today. And Guardian Nation members, that's our special membership program. If you're already a Guardian Nation member, or if you want to become a Guardian Nation member, you will save 20% with your special members only discount, which I can't give over the air. You'll find that in your members dashboard area on the site to get that 20% off of CCW Safe membership. Check them out, ccwsafe.com. Prosecutors dismiss charges, but don't clear Alec Baldwin in fatal shooting. You covered this one, Matthew, as well on the concealedcarry.com site. So basically, I mean, people I think are generally pretty familiar with the Alec Baldwin case. We've talked about it on the podcast. Done some coverage of it. Talked about the incident, of course. Basically, that's there was a point where there were no charges being filed, and then there were charges filed against Alec Baldwin and also the gunsmith, or the armorer, the set armorer in this case. So there were charges filed, and then apparently, due to the fact that the prosecution does not appear to be able to complete their investigation on the case in time before the preliminary hearing, which actually should have already taken place by this point. And so due to that, basically the prosecution not being able to be ready in time, they decided to dismiss charges. But that doesn't mean that they won't be able to refile charges again, should they decide to do so. And whether they will or not, we don't know. Matthew, what's some of the other key points on this news update?
Yeah, you covered most of it. The only other interesting part is they didn't dismiss the charges against the armor, and so whatever case that seems to be continuing ahead, as planned. And my skepticism in the whole thing is, I was shocked when they actually brought charges against him, because this seems to be a different standard when you're popular or well connected, and so when they brought charges, I was like, well, that's not that I want, like, I have it out for any specific person. I just think that if this would happen to anybody else, I would want anybody to be held accountable appropriately, given a proper hearing and trial and legal representation and all that, just because Alec Baldwin is an anti-gun nut and is a hypocrite. Like, it can seem like we just want to pin it, we want to stick it to him, but the truth is that, he claimed that the gun went off and he never pulled the trigger, and there's a forensic investigation on the gun that said that's factually untrue. He pressed the trigger, period. The gun was in his hand. It was aimed at a human being. And if there are no consequences to that, individual consequences, I don't know how, we're if there are no consequences to those actions, I don't know how people can have trust that the legal system or justice system is fair, in general. And that might be hyperbolic a little bit, but I'm just saying, this was not a unavoidable accident or anything like that. This is completely avoidable by him. And I don't know, that maybe charges will be coming in the future, but I don't know. I hope they just don't stick it on, this armor who had culpability or had, but you hate to see somebody be the sacrificial lamb for Alec Baldwin, so he can, they give the people a pound of flesh and he walks away and continues to make millions on movies and stuff. So I don't know, just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously know that there was all kinds of negligence and mistakes that were made on that set. Whether it rises to the level of a criminal case or not, I'm not privy to that level of information or judgment. But you know what I did learn fairly recently, is actually, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. I don't know how I discovered it or stumbled upon it, but I found this really interesting. The set armorer, her name is Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Well, that last name Reed is an interesting name. Okay, and here's why. Her father is Thel Reed, and I came across that and I was like, that name is really familiar. Why do I know that name? And her father is also well known in the Hollywood scene for being a master gunsmith, set armorer. He's consulted on tons of movies over the years, like decades. He's been a consultant on movies, especially with respect to gun handling, quick draw, Western movies, and things like that. Here's why Thel Reed has expertise in that area. If you'll go back to the leather slap match days back in the late 50s, early 60s, that Jeff Cooper set up in Big Bear, California, one of the winners of the annual event that they held there, the leather slap matches, was Thel Reed, a young up and comer rising star known for being ridiculously quick on the quick draw with a revolver. Just phenomenal hand speed and performance. He was a real up and comer and competed in a lot of different matches through the years, and that eventually led to him getting his jump start as a consultant in Hollywood for gun handling, shooting, those kinds of things, and becoming a set armorer and stuff like that. So thought that was an interesting connection, and that goes way back to some of the early history of kind of what, I mean, that's kind of the beginning of Jeff Cooper, really, and a lot of things that he developed, and later came, things like the modern technique and all that frankly we all owe a lot to Jeff Cooper, and we owe a lot to that history. And Hannah Gutierrez Reed's father is a part of that history in a big way. He's still alive to my last I checked. But it's a lot of the guys from that era are not. So that's kind of interesting. Just thought that was interesting as I came across that randomly one day. All righty, let's go to the next story here. Nebraska governor signs constitutional carry into law. So this came out just a couple weeks ago. This is new news, if you will. I think this makes the count 27 states in the United States of America that have some form of constitutional carry. More than half of the U.S. allows you to possess or to carry and or conceal and carry a firearm on your person without necessarily having a permit to do so. That's pretty remarkable. I was recently in a conversation with a friend who was lamenting of how there's so much under attack with respect to the Second Amendment, which is true, by the way. We're seeing that on a number of fronts. Heck, even right now, there's a bill going, trying to make its way through committees and things in the, I think it's in the U.S. House. No, actually, I think it might be on the Senate side. The intent is to prohibit suppressors, like just flat out no more. Which is like, why are we going after that? Why are we going after that now? Like, there's so many things that you anti-gunners could go after, right? But why that? Especially where countries all over the world don't even regulate suppressors, because it's just an accessory, and it makes, it's a good thing from a hearing protection standpoint. So anyway, the point is, there's a lot going on. And yeah, the Second Amendment is under attack, but there's a lot of good things going our way too. And so we need to not forget that. The fact that we have more states than ever, that, well, first of all, and some of this plays into the Bruin decision as well, but all 50 states now got to have some means for allowing you to get a permit to carry concealed in the first place. And then more and more states are allowing you to carry concealed without a permit. More states are allowing you to carry openly, should you choose to do so. Um, so many good things going for us in terms of the Second Amendment and what it means for us. So that's good. And we need to recognize that stuff. We also can't, let our guard down with respect to the different attacks that are coming and are taking place right now. But kudos to Governor Pillen, I think is his name. Jim Pillen, Governor Pillen in Nebraska. Kudos to you for signing this constitutional carry bill into law in the great state of Nebraska. Very cool.
Good thing. Good thing. Yeah, it's funny because we continue to hear that nationally, people are in favor of gun reforms and all this, and they never, until you actually define out like what gun reforms are people actually in favor of and what are they not. I think the general question is like, are you in favor of common sense gun reforms? And most people, if they're just asked that question, will be like, yeah, I mean, I guess I probably am. You know what I mean? If they're not aware of the topic or anything, it's presented in a way that sounds reasonable, and so they're like, yeah, I'm a reasonable person, so yeah, I'm probably. So they're like, okay, they're in favor of gun reform, and then so they'll connect that to like universal background checks, or 21 years old to own everything, and banning all kinds of firearms except muzzle loaders or whatever, some crazy stuff they want to do. And it's like, I don't think that that's the general consensus. As far as at the state level, we see quite the opposite. So I don't know.
Especially in the conservative states.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Matthew, tell us about you got another article here on concealedcarry.com. Feds to pay $144 million in a lawsuit for fatal Nick's blunder in Texas mass killing. This is referring back to the Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting, which occurred at the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. This is the one that many people are famously familiar with. Stephen Williford, who stepped in and certainly helped bring that to a conclusion in a big way, in a heroic way. But there's been this case going on for quite some time now, looking for reparations, if you will, to families and survivors of the Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting. We know that the United States Air Force, or some part of it, some division within the Air Force, was at major fault because the perpetrator of that mass shooting, had been discharged dishonorably from service after convictions for assault and domestic violence and stuff. He said he fractured his child's skull and assaulted his wife, right? And that's something that should have been reported to the NICS system and was not, right? But apparently also the Department of Justice has been found liable as well in some fashion here. Tell us what's the skinny here on this whole case here, Matthew?
Yeah, so you covered it perfectly. The killer, he passed two separate background checks to purchase a firearm. So he purchased them. Technically, he purchased them legally. Now, you could argue what that means because he actually lied on the 4473 forms, right? Like because it asks you if you've been dishonorably discharged. It asks you if you've been um, uh, convicted of domestic violence charges. So he lied. So technically, even though he passed a background check, he lied, and so purchased the gun illegally. But in any event, he passed the background check. And this is, we're always told, well, background checks, universal background checks would stop, keep everybody from getting a firearm who shouldn't have one. And essentially, this is what the judge in this case it says in a roundabout way in his ruling. And I'm trying to find the judge in here. Essentially says that Judge Xavier Rodriguez, he says that had the Air Force entered this data into the system, it would have triggered a denial. The killer wouldn't have been able to purchase the guns, and it would have deterred him from carrying out the church shooting. And so this kind of, now, while I think the ruling is correct, I kind of disagreed with the reasoning that, if this information would have been there, it would have stopped him, because we see many people get firearms that shouldn't have them. They circumvent a background check system, or we went through and looked at I forget how many 25 different mass shootings and how killers got their guns, and 23 of them out of the 25 passed background checks. So it's not like a foolproof thing. And I don't think the judge was making this argument essentially, but like I think that it can be inferred that like the NICS background check is like this flawless gatekeeping system that if you're that keeps the guns out of people's hands, and it just doesn't. It maybe in some cases, but not always. And when you have a system that is has multiple people pouring information in, they put in erroneous information or bad information or not timely information, or some agencies might not put information. It's just it's not a perfect system. And so to make it seem like it is, I think it's a false security. It provides false security. But yeah, in this save the I mean, the original settlement was, they settled, the government agreed to settle. It was 86 million dollars less than what they initially were on the hook for, because they appealed and challenged the lawsuit and everything. So yeah, this is one of those things where I don't know. It's a sad thing what happened. I don't think money takes away the pain and solves anything. But
Right.
there is a mechanism in our system, right? Lawsuits for loss of life and things like that to compensate, and hopefully this is brings some sort of I don't want to say closure, but some sort of retribution or I don't know what word I'm looking for, but um, you know, helps these families who've suffered loss and getting through the future without
Yeah.
their family members.
Well, like you said, money's not going to bring anybody back or fix any uh, problems, related to the losses of these individuals necessarily. Well, in some cases, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's going to help those families that um, maybe they were impacted financially because of the loss of a, a caregiver, a breadwinner, whatever, right?
Mhm.
But I think part of it is you got to make. Sometimes you need these types of cases. This is true even on the civil suit side, where sometimes you see things that are pretty crazy, massive, massive dollar amounts that are awarded towards victims of various things. That might seem a little bit crazy, but sometimes that's necessary to create a deterrent, right? To help ensure that something like that doesn't happen again. Now, the government, kind of has endlessly deep pockets, but this is a significant enough ruling that hopefully it keeps things from happening again like this. Now, here's the thing. I put up a question. Do you guys think there's a case to be made to just do away with background checks for firearm purchases? I know many gun owners think background checks are a good thing, but others feel criminals will obtain firearms anyway. Plus, with these background check failures, kind of calls into question some of and really the background check system is only as good as the information that's put into it, the integrity of that information, right? And so, yeah, you see a background check system failure, and this was a major failure in this case. Now, this guy may still obtain, like you covered, Matthew, very well. Okay, who's to say whether if he had been denied purchase of these firearms that he still wouldn't have, or that he still would have been able to just go ahead and get a gun anyway and do it, do it anyway. Well, that's certainly a possibility, right? But this is a system that's supposed to be put in place. It's supposed to be doing a particular job, and it didn't do its job, and it's only as good as um, the information is put into it and the human beings that are behind doing that job, those jobs, and making sure it actually happens. So anyway, before we get to we got one more story here, and this is actually not so much legislative in nature, but more of a new gun product that's been released to the market. But got to touch on a sponsor, which is KSG Armory today. KSG Armory holsters. That's frankly, if I'm being honest and transparent, that's our company of holsters we acquired last year. We were thinking about starting a holster company anyway, and when the opportunity came to acquire KSG Armory, a well-regarded, high reputation brand known for top quality. I mean, a lot of times I see people talk about various inside waistband or especially appendix inside waistband carry holsters online. A lot of times KSG Armory is mentioned alongside the names of other very well-regarded companies as well. So we're very honored to be a part of that brand now. For your next concealment holster, you might consider checking out KSG Armory today. Go to ksgarmory.com, and we'd love to support you with one of our awesome, comfortable, and super concealable holsters. It's been humbling to me the type of feedback I've gotten from those that have reached out to me to let me know that this is one of their best holsters they've ever tried. And some of those guys have tried, and gals have tried, holsters from all kinds of companies. So now, final story, all new FN Reflex 9mm pistol designed for everyday carry. So basically what this is the FN has decided to get on the, we'll call it the P365 train. That's basically what this gun is intended to compete with, is guns in that, we've kind of coined this new term, micro compact, since the P365 came out. There used to be things that we referred to as subcompact, and whether you think P365 as a micro compact is in the same boat as like an LCP or something like that, I don't know. It's beside the point. But this is kind of that new hot category, right? You see things like the P365, the Springfield Hellcat, the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, the Glock 43, 43X, 48, etc. They're all kind of in this not full, not even mid-sized guns, but they have generally high capacity or fairly high capacity as far as more than 10 rounds capacity. So this new FN Reflex pistol has, with a flush fitting magazine, 11 rounds, 11 plus 1. And there's an extended magazine available as well that brings it to 15 rounds and gives you essentially a full hand grip. If you look at the dimensions and the weight of it, it's right in the ballpark of all those other competitors I just mentioned a minute ago. I do not have personal, time with this. Haven't even seen one or held one, but looks, if it's anything like I've seen from other FN pistols, I'm sure it's a solid gun. I had an FN 509 for a while, shot it a bunch, tested it, really liked that gun. Yeah, so this is just a micro-sized version of that, essentially, from as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and it has it's a single action internal hammer action. So similar to the M&P Shield EZ, which it should, like you, I haven't had one, but from what I've read, it makes the gun a little bit easier to rack, and so that might be appealing for some people. If you like FN, you probably like the firearm. It's I'm trying to think of the other things that are in here. They have an improved trigger, 5-pound trigger. Essentially, like you said, it's a FN version, or competitive pistol in that class. It's coming in. It said MSRPs for anywhere from $600 to $650. So right around there. Red dot ready, of course. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did we cover the capacity? It's a 11 or 15 round capacity.
Yep.
You probably cover that, but yeah, in dimensions and pretty right in line with those ones that you mentioned. So yeah, if it interests you, might be something to watch for.
Yep. As you mentioned, optic ready. So it'll fit basically the same optics that its competitors will. So the Shield Arm SC footprint, the Halson K series optics, Romeo Zeros, those types of optics should drop straight onto the optic cut of this new FN Reflex and be fully compatible. It's got iron sights as well that. I'm guessing based on what I know about those optics, you probably still be able to get, backup iron, kind of co-witnessing, if you will, through that optic. So great. Awesome. More competition. I think it's a good thing. So if you're an FN lover or a fan, this might be the gun for you if you're looking for something in that category. So there you go. Standard Reflex runs $599. The optics ready MRD version is $659. So there is a iron sight only version that's a little bit cheaper. There you go. That brings us to a conclusion of our episode here today. We appreciate you for joining us for this news and legislative updates episode of the Concealed Carry Podcast. Shout out again to our episode sponsors today, which were CCW Safe. You can, again, learn more and get signed up at ccwsafe.com. Don't forget about the discount code CC Podcast to save 10%. And also KSG Armory, ksgarmory.com. By the way, KSG stands for Knowledge, Skills, Gear. And Gabe, the previous owner of KSG Armory, I think he was really onto something there, and I appreciate his ethos, if you will, and his what he was striving for with creating KSG Armory. Encouraging good knowledge, encouraging the development of skills, and then creating quality gear to support that. Well, that's a mission we're also very passionate about, and that we hope to continue today with KSG Armory. And I'm going to work on getting a discount code set up for listeners only of the podcast here. It's not live yet, but by the time you probably hear this in the podcast form, I'll make sure we have discount code for KSG Armory buyers, same as the CCW Safe one. CC Podcast, get you 10% off of a KSG Armory holster today. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for being a part of the podcast. Matthew, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
We'll bid you adieu. We'll see you again, I hope, next week. And until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.